What's up, everybody? I'm Scott Leese here with my good friend Richard Harris, and welcome to another edition of the Surf and Sales podcast. We are joined today by Ms. Amy Quick out of Plano, Texas, and I used to know what her job title and role was, but she has recently made a switch, and so I will let her announce it to the world. But welcome to the show, Amy. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Scott, Richard. So
Announce
Monday,
it to
I
the world.
guess. Yeah, I know when this video goes live, I will be a territory account manager at Fortinet here in Plano. So I'll be journeying the dark world of cybersecurity, speaking to all the hackers out there. Yeah, I'm really excited for that. It's kind of the next step up in my career, managing my own territory, and I'll be managing the Southeast. So if any of you have any CISO connections in the Southeast, send them my way. I'll try to sell them something if I can.
So are you in a individual contributor role, or are you managing a small team or a big team? What does that look like? I don't understand titles these days. So territory manager means 5 things at 5 different places.
Yeah, well, I mean, there could be like a handful of territory managers for any region. So I'm an independent sales rep, so I'll hold my own quota, and I'll be responsible for that and responsible for a lineup of accounts. Getting renewals, new logos will be like the primary motivator. For me, this is really interesting because they're SMB. So I've been selling in the enterprise space now for the last year, but then before that I was doing mostly enterprise. So now I'm going to get to dig in the weeds with the SMB folks and start selling to some small and medium-sized businesses. And so I'm really excited about that. That's kind of a new ball game for me, and I'm ready to play. So
You ready for the higher velocity and the faster pace and the more direct get to a decision?
Yeah, these 18-month sales cycles are just it's a whole nother monster there. You have to be really patient, and I'm not. So I can admit that. It's the enterprise sales is just an exercise in being patient. So
let's talk about that, because I think there's a lot of us in sales who aren't patient, right? I think it's innate quality, and I think it's one of the reasons a lot of salespeople are good. How do you even manage that, recognizing that within yourself? How do you get yourself to calm down? How do you get yourself to slow down? How do you ever have to kick yourself in the pants to kind of get going again? Like, what's that like for you?
Yeah, well, the last year has been a really interesting learning lesson for me because I've had to balance like a BDR role with an account executive role. So the initial stages of my job with IntelliMagic doing enterprise was mostly on the BDR side. So I was doing all of our outbound prospecting. My primary goal was, net new logo. And then about 4 months or so into the role, they kind of started throwing more of the stalled opportunities at me. So these were much warmer opportunities that we'd probably gotten to like budget and price proposal, and maybe even started looking at doing like a proof of concept or something with these accounts before they were stalled. So those were really interesting for me because then I got to kind of jump in the middle of the deal and try to figure out, okay, who do we talk to? What was said? I mean, I really had to read like the entire account history, like it was a novel. And then I had to figure out how to prospect to them to get them moving again. So it was kind of an interesting take on sales where I was doing straight cold outbound and then also fairly warm, complicated deal cycle outbound. And I got some big dogs moving, and especially going into 2020. But it was a testament to, okay, how aggressive can you be on one hand with the BDR stuff, but then how patient can you be with the account executive stuff and nudging them, but not, slapping them in the face and throwing cold water on them. So I didn't struggle with it, but I really had to relearn how to kind of back off the pace a little bit and switch between being an aggressive, SDR out doing straight outbound and really nurturing those deals and kind of learning like who the players are and scaling it back so that I can focus a little bit more intently on those deals. So
So
Yeah, it was interesting.
what made you, it sounds like you're having success in 2020, and granted, as of today, which is like May 28th or 29th, who knows what that means, right? Because it's COVID. Um, are what made you want to sort of change jobs in the middle of this, or was this sort of a COVID issue where, you know what, they couldn't do it, and so I had to move forward?
Yeah, well, there was two things. One was just the deal cycles.
Mhm.
I mean, some of these monster accounts. I watched my coworker, who's an account executive. I mean, he's going on a year before a proof of concept even starts, a free one at that. And to me, I was like, gosh, it just moves so slow when those accounts are so big. I mean, the legal and procurement side of things can take 6 months. So I was looking at the clock and looking at the calendar and trying to figure out, okay, when I get my first major deal closed, I could be there for a year and a half, because I'm only working the deals that I actually finally got moving in the latter half of 2019. So the pace was just a little slow for me. And I wanted to be able to kind of close deals in a 30, 60, 90-day window and stick within those quarters, because for me, that's a little bit more exciting and dynamic. Um, and
That's
I thrive
really
on the challenge.
self-aware. That's amazing self-awareness, right? To kind of say, because there is, to some extent, maybe a luxury to a 12 to 18 month sales cycle. You have a long time to ramp, right? You don't, not to say that you wouldn't want to prove yourself, but you can coast a little bit longer. So
Right.
it's really interesting to see that you're so self-aware in that. As you look at that and trying to, change, have you noticed you making decisions like that elsewhere in your life other than this job? Like, whether it's in work, out of work, just curious how
Yeah.
your decision making process came to fruition.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I took a 7-year gap in my career, from when I was with CMA on a strategic sales team, took a 7-year hiatus to start a family and to be a Navy wife and follow my husband up and down the East Coast. And that was, I think that window of time gave me a really greater perspective on life in general. Because one, I realized that I am not idle. I really, as much as I loved being home with my kids, I was always bored trying to find some project to throw myself into. It would be little side projects. Like in New York, I wanted to do like, you know, basically turning junk and repurposing it and selling it. And I don't know, I got on all these like crazy little side ventures because I couldn't stop my brain from thinking and wanting to have like some sort of intellectual stimulation. And you can only read so many books. So um, I found that for me, the way I look at life is kind of a series of adventures and challenges, and I do get bored with things really easily. And when that happens, I have to challenge myself to go a little bit further. So, like right now in my personal life, my daughter and I, we have 3 horses, and we keep them out at this place called DG Ranch here in Texas. And it's this gorgeous sport performance, reining ranch. And I've been a professional equestrian. I mean, I went professional at 18. I've been riding since I was 2. And I suddenly got the itch about 6 months ago. I was like, I'm going to start competing again. I'm going to get back into it. I'm going to, set myself that bar. But the crazy thing about it is, because I'm a professional equestrian and I've taken money teaching riding lessons, I cannot go back to showing amateur or anything like that. I have to show immediately in the open ring, which is like up against all the professionals. And so I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun. But I'm up for the challenge, because for me, it's like, well, if you're gonna have a target on your back, I mean, like when you're that big, there's going to be little guys coming to get you. And I'm like, oh, I want to be the little guy. So yeah, I think I do the same thing in my personal life too. And just, I don't know, I
What
like
are the,
challenge.
I mean, I think there's a lot. I think it's fairly easy for us to identify them, and then I'll shut up and let Scott ask some questions. But as you think about learning to ride a horse or show a horse or compete in a horse, obviously there's some similarities to sales in that. What would be a similarity though that wouldn't be obvious, right? Like we know the practice has got to be there, right? We know there's a pitch, like, what are something that maybe we wouldn't know that you're like, oh, this is something interesting?
I would definitely point to the emotional side of sales. So being able to manage anxiety, emotions, high stress environments. So when you look at a horse, okay, they are naturally hardwired to run from danger. Anything they fear, they're going to fight or fly. And that includes people. So if you are on a horse and you're a nervous person, that horse is going to pick up on it right away. Whether anyone around you can see that you're nervous, that horse will know. And they act funny. They act out. They don't like it. They don't like being around people with anxiety and high levels of stress and tension, because that horse, its natural flight response is saying, what the hell is this person scared of? And how fast can I get away from it? And
God, I'm
that's a
canceling your
bad
birthday
situation.
present. Sorry, buddy.
I might be part horse as I listen to you.
Right. Well, I don't know. It's really interesting to see, though. The hardest part about teaching people how to ride a horse is teaching them to overcome their fears. It's like you got to relax. You got to calm down. You're on a living, breathing animal that wants to run at any minute. Even the most well-trained horses, if there's danger, if there's a mountain lion there, forget about it. Like they're going to watch their ass.
What are those internal fears? Okay, I promise this is the last question. What are those internal fears that you have to help someone get over to learn to ride a horse? Because I think there's a ton of internal fears we have to get over in sales.
Well, giving up control. I mean, you're on an animal's back. At that point, you're trusting them to a certain extent. And so someone that has a lot of issues with control, they're going to struggle with that a little bit. And so that's one thing. Number two is like learning how to, I mean, it's natural to get nervous about, getting on a large animal or anything like that. But you have to be able to trick your brain into telling your body that you're cool and you're relaxed and everything's okay. So you got to bring your heart rate down. You got to bring your breathing down. So those natural nerves that we have that are like our, fight or flight response, we have to learn to suppress that in order to not trigger this animal. So those are two things that I think correlate really well in the sales world, because you have things like call reluctance. Well, what happens before someone freaks out about making a phone call? Their breathing escalates, their heart rate goes up, their stress levels are on high alert, they're uncertain, there's a level of fear there. They don't know what's going to happen on the other end of the call. And so being able to kind of work with people like that and just say, hey, you know what, it's okay. Like you can kind of force yourself to calm down and just, you know what, throw your leg over the saddle and get on and go. Like that's the easiest advice you can give someone when they're riding a horse. Just get on and go, just relax. And I think sales is very similar. I think we overcomplicate sales. Like we overthink it all the time.
So in the spirit of just get on and go, I have noticed, as have a lot of people, you have put a lot more time and energy and effort into content creation and building your brand on LinkedIn. And, when I think of you and your brand on LinkedIn, you along with like two other people are like the emoji queens that I can think of. That was something that I noticed you got on, on with pretty early. But when did you really start focusing on this part of yourself and your business? For me, it feels very much like a 2020 initiative for you, but I could be totally wrong, and that just might be where I've really seen it. So talk a little bit about that journey so far for you.
Yeah, well, I started really in the later part of 2019. And that was because I really was trying to get on the radar of all these decision makers. And I was like, I'm one girl sitting in an office in Texas, and I have to compete against IBM, who's in the ear of every customer on site in every major city. So how do I compete with that? And I just looked at, okay, well, if I can grow my personal brand, if I can become a more interesting person in some ways, there's a chance that by default, I'm going to end up getting more exposure. And then maybe one of these decision makers that I'm actually connected with on a meeting has seen my content or heard of me, or they've, finally connected with me and engaged in some way. And I think it was, for me, it was like, okay, let's see what we can do with this. And I just started studying and watching what was really attracting people to LinkedIn to begin with. And I started to notice kind of a shift in content where LinkedIn for me has always been very buttoned up, super, super business. I mean, if you think about it, B2B business is booming on LinkedIn, and there's a lot of money exchanged, exchanging hands based on networking and relationships that have been formed sometimes just strictly via LinkedIn. So I saw that and thought, okay, well, I need to capitalize on that, but I can't lose my individuality, because that's ultimately what's going to set me apart. And if I'm just kind of buttoned up, super serious, and oh, I know what I'm talking about all the time, then that's going to be disingenuous in my opinion. So I decided just to say to hell with it and just be myself. And I am like super sarcastic and snarky and like I do not take myself very seriously and until it's crunch time. When I need to be serious, Amy, I can dial it in. But for the most part, I'm pretty laid back. I mean, I have 3 goofy kids and a crazy life. And I felt like, oh, this isn't Instagram. This isn't Facebook. But why not show a little bit more personality, and a little bit more humility and humor and fun in what we're doing in our day-to-day lives and business too? Because I guarantee you, this guy that's sitting at his desk, okay, in some corporate world is probably exchanging memes with his team and cracking jokes, and they probably have inside jokes, and they're not stuffy, like, boring people all day long. Otherwise, gosh, can you imagine? Like, who would, I don't know, that no one lives life like that. They all have fun. And I think we failed to, I wasn't seeing enough of that on LinkedIn. I was kind of seeing just it was so serious all the time. And I felt like there's a time to be serious. But for me, I kind of wanted to show a little bit more raw honesty. I don't know.
So you kind of got into it at first to open up, kind of change the narrative a little bit, but also to help you sell for your company, right?
Right. Yeah.
Now you've taken the step to kind of come up with your own thing, and you've got 5 on Friday going, and this is, has the potential to become something, right? And something that you do that is yours, and not content that you're creating or monetizing for somebody else. So maybe tell everybody, first of all, what 5 on Friday is, and like, why did you start it, and what is your vision for it?
Yeah, so 5 on Friday is true peer-to-peer sales and marketing mentoring. So every Friday we bring on a presenter. It could be an SDR, an account executive, or hell, we've had people that are in the prime of their career. They've been selling for 20 years. But they come on and they do a demo run through, a cold call script. They'll do discovery call, kind of a discovery call flow, or they'll just run us through a part of their sales process that they either want additional advice on, or they're getting stuck. And we've even had brand new sales reps on that have never sold before, have started their own startups, and just kind of want some guidance on what their value prop should be, how they should sell, who they should be targeting. And it all started because I felt like there was a lack of succinct and free sales education for people. Like, they can go on to LinkedIn, and they can buy ebooks, they can buy books, and all of those things are essential, right? I read sales books, several a year, because I need to learn and grow. But I felt like the one thing that we were getting stumped on was that, okay, these people are actually selling during the day. I mean, they shouldn't be on LinkedIn. They should be selling. Unless LinkedIn is included in their outreaching and prospecting efforts. But the point is, they should be using those prime selling hours to sell. And that doesn't leave them as much time for their own self-education and growth. And like, what do they do when they get stuck or hung up? They're going to be trying to find content, watch it, read books, go to sales conferences, jump on webinars. All right, well, you rack up the hours, that could be like 15, 20 hours worth of self-education in a week. What happens if they just need like something short and snappy, and they want to be able to walk away with advice that they can put to work like the next day? And so Francois Bardot and Patrick Downs and I were just kind of goofing around and thought, well, you know what? I mean, we're sales reps. We're in the trenches doing it every day. Like, why the hell can't we just give them an hour of our time and give them some advice if they want it? And that's really where it came from. And it's blown up. I mean, we're booked out like 6 months with participants. Presenters were booked out like going on 3 months. And then this video, I guess, will be dropping next week. So I could say it now, but we're rolling out and kicking off a 5 on Friday UK edition. So we'll be dropping that next week. And Australia wants to get involved. We've got people in South America that are really looking forward to getting involved in it because they want to be able to sell more effectively in the US. So it's just, I mean, it's really crazy because there's plenty of sales coaches and consultants and tools out there, but there's nothing that is just like,
yeah, but those guys
are
idiots. I mean,
oh yeah,
sales coaches
no
and advisors and stuff. Those guys don't know what they're talking about.
Oh, it's funny. Yeah, I had a conversation with Josh Braun like months and months ago, and he was like, Amy, tell me honestly, like, how do you feel about the sales culture and like the sales coaching culture in general? And I was like, I don't know, sometimes it's just, there's so much of it. It's almost like, where do you turn? And there's a lot of fluff. There's a lot of theoreticals.
Let's talk about that for a second then, because here's what I like and dislike about that sentence in question.
Yeah.
Right? I like the fact that Josh is trying to get at, like, what do you think about the sales like culture and training and all that, and everybody always talks about like how noisy it is and all this kind of stuff. What I don't like is when people make these blanket statements like, oh, there's a lot of fluff, or there's a lot of bad advice, or there's this or that and the other. It's like that doesn't help somebody distinguish between the two.
Right.
I mean, nobody calls out anybody else. Like, no one's like, oh, hey, Scott, your post, sucks. It's like all fluff. Or, hey, Richard, like, this is a totally terrible post. You should never put that out there. Right. So I feel like people just whisper all these things like, oh, there's crap out there.
Yeah.
Never call anybody out. And so in particular for people who are like new in their career, or maybe like really kind of leaning into LinkedIn for the first time, how would you guide them to figure out which people they should follow and listen to and which ones they should not?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because I feel like I'm not a very combative person, but I see bad advice, and I sometimes it's hard for me not to say something. And I put comments on other people's posts before that were like, I disagree with you completely, and here's why. And I respect their opinion, and I respect the fact that they have a platform in the First Amendment. They can say whatever the hell they want. So I think what you have to look at is the quality of content that people are putting out. For instance, like, okay, one of the things that I think is cool about like a Josh Braun or a Dale Dupree is, they'll tell a story, but you're learning a lesson in it, and they're either giving away little tidbits of value right up front. I mean, Josh has released like he did a webinar where he broke down an entire email and like showed you completely how to rewrite the email in a webinar. And if you've got a sales rep that has a time crunch, right, because they don't have time to attend a ton of webinars and whatnot, getting that much value out of the webinar is huge. And you're going to respect the fact that that person didn't just waste an hour of your time with a bunch of garbage about, their program and how awesome they are, and, sales theory, and they gave you tangible stuff that you can walk away with and apply immediately. And for me, that instantly builds credibility for me and someone, because I think the saying, like, if you can't sell, you teach, I don't agree with that. I think that like someone like yourself has been selling for years and years and years, and you built and developed the street cred that you can stand up and say, no, I'm going to coach. I'm going to show you what to do, and I'm going to talk to you about it. But there's some people out there that lack that depth of actual sales experience, and it shows because you can see that they repeat a lot of content, or they're just saying the same thing over and over again in a different way. And you always are left feeling like, what did I really learn from reading this post? Or what did I learn from this webinar that I just spent, invested 30 minutes of my time on? And maybe I'm more hypercritical than most, but I think there's a lot of people out there that, that feel that way. So I would say when you're looking at someone, you got to look at content. If you leave reading a post and you're like, oh, that's kind of cool, I should try that. That's pretty good. I mean, I've seen like Sean Cease, I think that's how you say his name. I could be completely butchering it. But he does some really cool whiteboards and stuff. And I'm always like, holy cow, like I never really thought about it that way. And so I think that's what I gauge it by is just look at the content, look at the character of the person. And, if you feel like you leave and you're taking some tangible benefit from the content or the post or the webinar or whatever it is, then keep going back and seeing what value they're going to bring later on down the road. So I don't know, that would be my advice, because I mean, it's hard to fool people when with content, I think, because unless you're stealing it for someone else, I mean, that's possible. I'm sure that happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because there's not, a lot hasn't changed since, I don't know, biblical days in the world of sales, right? It really hasn't. Everybody's trying to repurpose and repackage, right?
Yep.
And but I think it's the unique perspective that everybody brings that adds that value. At least that's the intent, right? Like whether it's Scott's sort of addiction model or my neat selling model or whatever else you like to do, it's the unique perspective that creates I hope the connection for other people. So it's interesting to see what's happening out there, and I think there's a lot of it right now. Just look, with everything that's happening in the layoffs and what's going to happen in June and July, I think that you're going to see more and more noise.
Yeah.
I think the consistency of the people who've been doing it needs to stick. If they start to walk away, they're going to get forgotten. That'll be that challenge for people like me. At least in my paranoid mind, right?
Don't be a dinosaur, in other words.
I already feel that way.
Don't be.
I'm already a dinosaur. There's no issue there. So the difference between my dinosaur and Scott's dinosaur is that I'm officially at the diamond range, and Scott is still in that sort of crude oil range of how old he is. So
yeah, I'm not far behind you guys.
So,
but
you are behind.
I won't give my age. What was that?
Is it? But you are behind us. You are behind.
Oh, maybe a little bit.
So
yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think LinkedIn has gotten pretty noisy, and I think most of the people I follow are maybe a little off the beaten path, but there's a reason why. And some of them it's purely entertainment for me. I just like this person; they make me smile, and there's a big part of that.
But that's good too, because I agree with you. I am definitely stuck in the cycle of me and Scott and Morgan and Barrows and Dale, and although Dale's newer to me in the last year or so, but his stuff is so fresh, right? It's so good. Daniel Disney, who are the offbeat people you are paying attention to?
They're the kind of he's gonna hate me for saying this, but the weirdos of the world, like Justin Michael is one that I follow pretty closely. I've had some of the quirkiest freaking conversations. What was that?
I said, yeah, he's been on our show, and I've known him for a decade or more, probably.
Yeah. That dude is he's and I will say it straight to his face, like he is weirdly wonderful. Sometimes he just goes off on a tangent, and I'm like, who is this? What am I witnessing right now? Is how I feel a lot of times. But when you actually talk to people like that are like so just when they get invested on something, they just put everything in it, and that's how diamonds are created, under that kind of pressure, right? You've got guys like that are just like, okay, I'm going to focus on this one aspect, and I'm going to be the best of the best at what I do in this particular component. And then, I think that's sensible, and there probably should be more people doing that. But, kind of hyper focusing on one thing in particular. So like guys like Justin Michael are great. I like, someone like David Massover. He's not really off the beaten path, but what I like about David Massover and his content is he's just so steady. Like I'm like, man, if he was running my sales team, I'd be confident, because he's just got a steady process and attitude. And I've gotten on phone calls with that guy, and he's like, immediately challenges me. Like he quoted my own comment on one of his posts back to me once on a call. And I was talking about like not making emotionally rash decisions, and and I was making an emotionally rash or kind of impulsive decision at the time. And he just quotes it back to me, and I'm like, dang, I did say that, didn't I? So I love Dale Dupree. I think his everything that he's doing is really quirky. And then I look at a lot of the branding guys too, like Justin Reynolds. He's actually here in Dallas. He's freaking hilarious. Some of the video content that he's putting out, and I don't know. I kind of I'll call out Patrick Downs on this one. My co-founder, he's something else. I don't know what he is, but he's awesome.
He came to Surf and Sales, and absolutely feel like he was such an added benefit in ways that I can't even imagine. Like just getting to know him there and having some real deep conversations was fascinating for me with him. And then watching what he does, it just amazes me. Like he's really embraced a lot of things. So I love Patrick.
Yeah, he's like, I don't know, he's like a big brother to me. I felt so bad. I did one of his podcasts, and he had to edit off like the entire last segment of it because it got just way too inappropriate. I was talking about my first ever sales call on the floor of West Telecommunications, and it was pretty funny. But yeah, I think guys like that, and girls too, are like Tabitha Kavanaugh. Like we've become really tight, and I think they just don't care about their image, like it's really more about developing relationships and connecting with people, and working with people that will truly benefit your life, and you're going to benefit them in some way too. And I think that that's so important, especially nowadays, to kind of be surrounded by people that are going to challenge you, that you're going to learn from, but that you can also just laugh and have, ridiculous meme chat battles with. You guys, you looked frozen for a second. You're just very intently focused. I was like,
So as we kind of wrap things up here, Amy, we always like to end the show by offering to help our guests in any way. If you have any questions for us that you want to kind of discuss, or if there's something that you're working on. We already kind of talked about 5 on Friday a little bit. So how can we be helpful to you?
Yeah. Well, I would love to kind of hear what your guidance would be for, I wouldn't say necessarily a startup, but what would be your guidance to someone like me who's trying to grow a brand on LinkedIn, and I'm trying to do it organically, and bootstrap it and keep it and not lose the kind of the appeal of what it is, like kind of keep that small feeling, but grow my network and grow the company. I mean, what would be your advice to someone like me that's trying to build that brand?
I don't know anything about building a brand non-organically. It's number one.
It's true. So, no paid pods.
Yeah, no. Is that a thing? Paid pods? Wow.
It is. It is a thing.
Well, I never got offered to do that. I'm not cool enough, I guess, for paid pods. But no, you just, one of the things that you said at the beginning of our discussion here, led Richard to say, wow, that's really good self-awareness. And, I think it was specifically around recognizing, you're impatient. So enterprise is not like the best place for you. And I had that same exact moment, 15 years ago or so. And that self-awareness is really important. And I think people who are really self-aware oftentimes are confident enough in themselves to just be who they are and speak their mind and say what they feel and not change over time, right? So, don't get nervous or overthink certain things. Like, just keep putting things out there and see what happens and see what works. Don't get discouraged by the hate that you're going to get. That will show up. If you don't get it already. Like, I joke with Richard. I'm like, I could make a post about donating $1 million to like every single connection of mine, and somebody somewhere would tell me what a loser I am. Right? So like, no matter what, you're going to start to get garbage and trash kind of thrown at you, and it's hard sometimes to not take it personally, but try to remember, like, for every one or two pieces of negative feedback, there's potentially hundreds of pieces of positive feedback. So stick with who you are, keep doing what works and feels comfortable for you, and and then push yourself a little bit to take even more risks. This is my own kind of personal take. Like, as you start to get a little bit larger audience, and therefore your voice is amplified a little bit. I personally feel like, some of us have a little bit more responsibility to speak up and out on particular topics that are a little bit taboo, right? So maybe that's diversity issues, maybe that's, women in sales, maybe that's mental health, that's addiction, whatever it is. Use your voice for the greater good. And, I think if you're doing those things, you're going to be just fine. One last thing I'll say, don't mistake organically growing your network for moving at a turtle's pace.
Right.
That does not mean growing organically does not mean you just have to, add 2 or 3 connections like every day. When I first decided to try to, like, really be active on LinkedIn, and Richard was right there with me. We sort of timed it at the same time, I think. We were like, oh my gosh, I'm going to try to add, 50 people today. I'm going to try to add 100 people today. I wonder if I can get 250 people, today. Organically done, but with purpose. And part of that purpose, back to the like lack of patience and self-awareness thing, like, once I sink my teeth into something, like, it's fucking go time. Like, I don't have the patience to wait 5 years to go from 5,000 connections to 50,000, right? So be purposeful about trying to grow things. Those are some of the tips that I would give you. Richard, what do you think?
I agree with all that. And for me, some of it's your own personality. I'm way more paranoid about stuff, I think, than Scott, or I can at least say I wear my paranoia on my sleeves a lot more than Scott does. He may be better at hiding it. And what ends up happening for me, like, these are the mistakes I see myself making and I try to fix, and it's hard for me to fix, are trying too hard. I try too hard, and then I let that get me down and create some imposter syndrome moments. I try different things, and if it doesn't work, I take it really, really hard. Like, what am I doing? Like, this thing worked and I drove 1,000 people to it last week. I did something else and it drove 3. And I'm just like, holy shit, what's going on? So now I'm diving back into it and I've solved the problem. But that's the hard part for me. I also think, like, to your point about humor, right? Like, I've got this whole shit my sales manager used to say thing that I've done. I'm going to put an ebook out on it, but I've gotten away from doing it. Like, I've had a new one going out. If it's not out now, it'll be out in a couple of minutes. And I kind of need to keep doing the fun things that I forgot that I liked. I've always, recently, I would say over the last 6 months to a year, I've tried to chase the dragon of the numbers on LinkedIn. And I need to stop doing that. Right. I know certain things, I know other things. Scott's better at the engagement on that side. And yeah, it drives me nuts. I'm like, why does he get that? And I don't. But I need to stop worrying about what Scott does and just focus on me and let me be me. And I go to Scott for advice. It doesn't mean I don't try to learn or ask his advice or other people. The other thing I would say, I just got a mentor for the first time in, my entire life. I'm 51. And in the last month, I had my first mentor because I got out of my own way to stop saying, oh, I can figure this out, or I'll just use Scott as my mentor, which is I do, but I also need someone who's not my best friend, who's not one of my closest people. And he's literally in the last month, he's changed my business model, and like, it's crazy, like the goodness. So get that mentor,
Yeah.
get the mentor that knows you, but doesn't know you. That's not a friend. Those would be the pieces I would think about. And then the rest will take care of itself, right? From a branding perspective, right? And my only last piece of advice is the mentor I went out and got was an SVP of sales, aside from Scott, because that's who I sell to. That's who I talk to. So
Right. Yeah.
I think, again, and so this will help you build the brand. I think, KD, who's been on our show, Kevin Dorsey, he's got a professional mentor. He's got another person who's his marriage friend to go talk to. He's African American, and so he's got someone who's African American because he can share that experience of getting that feedback, because I could never give that to him, right? So it's okay to have more than one, is sort of what I would say, and that will help you internally and emotionally, and that'll come through in your brand and your messaging.
Yeah, I think that's huge for me because I've always been like the lone wolf in many ways, and that's not a good place to be. It's fun and while it lasts, but ultimately, who's going to save you from yourself? Sometimes you need that tough love and you need that mentoring, and that's definitely something I'm going to be open for, because as 5 on Friday progresses, we're rolling out the UK edition. That's a whole nother thing, and it there's I feel a level of responsibility there, for not only myself but also the people that are coming on the show, and everyone that's going to be involved with it. And for me, I want to make sure that I'm going to be the best. I'm always going to be putting my best foot forward, and when I'm not, I'm going to know that it's okay and I can ask for help. So I love it. I love the advice, and the crazy thing is, this time last year I had maybe 200 connections on LinkedIn. I don't think I think I probably had the same number of followers. I don't know. But now I'm like, it's just crazy. I've got like close to 10,000 followers now on LinkedIn in literally about a 5-6 month window. And it just happened out of nowhere. I'm like, where do these come from? Because I wasn't running my numbers or looking at any of that stuff.
Keep going with it. You're doing a great job, and I think that you add a lot of brevity and like goodwill, and they're fun posts to read, but they're also insightful. And congratulations on the new gig, and the 5 on Friday thing is a cool byproduct of stay at home and quarantine and all that. So I'm
right.
looking forward to seeing what all of you do with that little side hustle. So
I'm excited, and thanks for coming on. Jonathan's been like working real hard since you were on there. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he moves forward.
Anytime.
So
Happy to do. Oh, wait a minute. You weren't talking to me. Sorry.
Yeah, you could come on too, Richard. We can get you on as soon as next Friday. Let's do this.
And then they can decide who's more terrifying, me or Richard.
Yeah. It was so funny. I enjoyed it. So I appreciate you taking the time.
All right, Amy. Thanks for.
All right, we got to go. But Amy, that was awesome. Thanks for joining us.
All right, guys. Have a good weekend.
You too.